Hey everyone, how are you today? Have you ever known that our history is all BS? I mean, as long as you've been on this planet, I know my generation, as long as you've been on this planet, your history has changed. You went from history to social studies, and before that, history was well known everywhere in the United States. We all talked about it, we all spoke about it, and we had a lot of great grandparents and grandparents alive in those times that were able to speak about their history of World War One, World War Two, and even before that a little bit. We didn't have anyone that was speaking much about the 1800s, but there were a few people that were alive in the 1800s, or the 1890s. So let's go back from the history that us Generation X know. We already know that the history that they've given us now and the social media and in the history in school, we know that all of that is just malarkey, poppycock, BS. Only because we saw the lies come into fruition. But if you do go way back when, you do remember that. Um, well, if you're a little older than me, you remember the Nixon saying war on cancer, right? And nobody knew about this war on cancer. 1956, which was about 13 years before I was born, there was this doctor, Dr. Cohen, and he experimented on every mammal known to man, every single one. He injected them all with a couple of ingredients that wind up producing cancer inside the system less than 72 hours. Now, what it was snake venom. So the snake venom wind up causing cancer in almost every mammal inside the epidermis. So if you're inside the epidermis, anything that has epidermis, the uterus, and I don't want to sit there and school you on science, but you can do the research. Now, all of that paved its way for the cancers that we have now and all the diseases we have now and the disorders we have now. Because in 1956 he experimented. In 1986 he would get a Nobel Prize for it. 10 years before that he opens up this place called Genotech and has 7 patents for drugs that cancer patients wind up using. And these drugs have ACE inhibitors. Now, if you have cancer, you type in ACE inhibitor and the name of your cancer, and you can see which one and how much the amount of snake venom is in there. A lot of us don't really research these things, but for some reason I'm able to pull a lot of things that I research and find and hear from other people. I'm able to pull them together just to figure out certain things because my generation also didn't have that much cancer back in 1989 when I left to go into the military. There was maybe as far a few people who had cancer. It was a very small amount. And to me, whenever American politicians say the word war, I always, something locks in and says, okay, they're creating the war. You know, um, they're investing in this war. 1.6 billion, and that was a lot back then. 1.6 billion got pumped into cancer and the treatments and the discovery of it, and also the knowledge to learn about it in 1971. This so 1956 he creates all these cancers, Dr. Cohen. 1973 Nixon quotes War on Cancer, December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. He quotes this War on Cancer, and now it's implemented and introduced inside the population. 86 Dr. Cohen gets the Nobel Prize. 3 years later I leave in the military and go around the world. When I came back, let's see, I came back for the first time in 1991, and a lot of people had cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, and that was all not uh, prevalent inside society. I mean, there were people that had it, but it wasn't so prevalent. It wasn't a large amount of people that had it. Because I remember traveling around the world, and a lot of people didn't have these disorders or diseases. So here I am, traveling in 1999. I came back, stayed for a little while, went back to live in Europe, and didn't come back until I want to say 2007, 2006. That's when I came back. 2006, there was this huge wave of autism, and I've never heard of it over in Europe. Autism. There were maybe one or two kids. There were a handful of kids that had it all around, but it wasn't prevalent. It wasn't huge. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, I remember the story about Dr. Cohen and introducing all of these, all these uh, snake venoms inside medicines in order to heal society. But then you notice that anyone who has cancer never gets healed until they go through a enormous amount of radiation and chemotherapy, if they make it. Because all those pills with the ACE inhibitors, when you swallow it, it gets down to the stomach acids kill that, so it doesn't really go anywhere. It has to be injected, but they don't inject you with it. So that's where I saw that we have that long-term sick care. We like to keep people terminally ill and sick for a long time. Because Americans are great. You go outside, get hit by a car, your head gets knocked off, rolled off, they could sew it right back on. Your legs come off, they could sew it right back on. Have anything that's long term, you're stuck with it. Thrombosis, cancer, ADHD, high blood pressure, diabetes. None of it gets cured as fast as emergency care. Emergency care, we excel in. Long term health care, we suck at it. And I've noticed that. When I was in other countries, I remember having thrombosis when I got out of the military, and when I went to go play baseball in China and Japan and had to go to the doctor and let them know what it is. They'd recommend me going to a place where it has tinctures and teas. So I went, and I had a 16-year career. Hey, no problem. Until I come back to the States. Then more lung embolisms, and actually when I got hurt and injured, that's when I started getting more injuries, lung embolism, blood clots, subdural hematoma. But all of us are able to survive these things. I know we are because I'm surviving them. And I'm surviving them through techniques and traditions that other countries had across the ocean, across the Atlantic Ocean, and also across the Pacific Ocean. In between, they don't do anything in the United States. South America, on the other hand, has an enormous amount of cures and tinctures and organic products and natural products, Mother Nature products, in order to heal yourself. You don't even have to mix most of them. Some of them you can just sit there and chew or lay on your body and ingest. And I noticed that long-term sick care, that's a United States thing. It started to spread around 2007. Because when I went back to Europe, maybe I was here for 5 years. Then I went back, and then I realized, oh, wow, kids have autism here too. And I thought maybe I brought it on my shirt. I was just like, I didn't understand how all of a sudden they had it when it didn't exist when I was there. And it didn't exist in 1989. It didn't exist. Cancer didn't exist back then. Thrombosis. If you had surgery, you got blood clots, and those things. It wasn't everyone with a circulation problem, everyone with a diabetic problem, everyone with breathing problems and allergies and disorders and sickness. It was not in abundance. And if you're a Generation X, you know it. You've been awakened to it. But you're sleeping. I don't know. I understand why you're sleeping. I can understand working 40 hours a week, get you tired, and looking for that paper and hustling for that paper. You know, you work 40 hours a week and then have a side hustle and then another side hustle and then some illegal hustle. That's how the system is in America. They give you this idea that the streets are paved with gold and everyone suckers and comes on over here, and you realize it isn't. If you were smart, like my uncle said to me one time, it's like it doesn't matter what country you go to. If you're going to make money, invest outside. Don't invest back in because taxes they'll kill you. No matter what country you're in, if you're a local, they'll kill you. So you come to a place, take that money, invest it in your own town, in your own country, in your own home, and I've seen that work. I've seen that work everywhere. But it's very difficult to be able to stay in a country unless you sit there and you have money. I was lucky. I went to Europe and they said to me, if you want to stay here, you just have to do the average job that the normal person doesn't do. So I mentioned I have a contract. I'm playing professional baseball. Eyes lit up. Hold on, we'll print out the card right away. So they went, fill out the papers. I signed them, fill out the card, and there I was. When I came back here, 2007, I stayed too long because I had a subdural hemorrhage that I wound up um, having to fight for that citizenship again because I lost it the first few years because I was out of the country. And you're supposed to be inside that country, just like any country you go to. You got to be in that country for a certain amount of time in order to keep your green card or your eligibility. So, like I said, I was blessed and I was able to do it. So it is difficult. But now we'll get back to um, all of these disorders because there's too many disorders all over the place. And when I was in Asian countries, they had ways of helping you with those disorders. Because I almost never saw an Asian person have the flu or have the sniffles and have the sneeze. I used to think they were robots. Because I'm like, holy shit, you guys don't even get gray hair. So I thought, maybe they are. I've never seen a Chinese woman pregnant. No offense. I've just never seen a Chinese woman pregnant. I've seen some from Hong Kong, Indonesia, and those things, but I just never saw it. So I used to think, as a little kid, you put two and two together as a little kid, and as you're growing up, you just keep speculating and guessing because you don't have good I didn't have good role models, but you don't have good role models sitting there teaching you the things in life. So you're just going to use your intuition and your gut feeling and your senses and your imagination, and you mix it all together. I was that golden child. I never ever had someone help me pave my way. My father was not a father figure. My mother was not a mother figure. My aunts, sort of like motherly, but I didn't get mother and father figures until I started to travel. That's when I saw it. That's when other people saw it in me. Because over here, I was just a beautiful heart and soul. Everyone knew me for only being kind, only being nice, only being helpful. And that's the way I was raised because my father had this heavy hand that, yeah, if you didn't listen and you got in trouble, you got beat. And I didn't want to get beat because my mother's next door neighbor, she saw me in, 2007 when I came back. And she said to me, oh my God, she gave me a big hug. And I didn't think you were going to make it. And I spoke about this on the video that, on earlier videos, that she thought I wasn't going to make it because of the things that my father had done to me, the way my father had treated me, the way he beat me. She never thought I'd make it. And there were a couple of teachers that knew about it, but no one could say anything. The people on the block, they were afraid of my father. The police officers that used to work with him, they were afraid of my father, so they didn't care. They didn't want to step in. They didn't want to know anything. So I was always on my own. Now you have a brief summary. That's why that little child that's inside stayed in my head too, in that divine spirit. So I was talking about the Asian Chinese when I said, okay, I didn't think they were real. Because Kung Fu Saturday, everyone knew how to be a ninja or a master or a Super Saiyan or something. And when I got there 20 years later or 15 years later to play baseball, I made some jokes, and try to, roughhouse, as a man here when I was there. And they're like, and I thought, oh man, so not all of you are ninjas and samurais? Oh shit, I thought you were. Then I started thinking, oh wow, are they real? You know, it made no sense. Then I remember this movie Men in Black, where everyone, some people would get dressed up as an alien, and then bells and whistles went off, and I'm like, oh man, they're the only culture that really has black eyes, and the only ones that I knew had black eyes were stuffed animals and the gray aliens that I see on TV. So I was like, oh my goodness, could they be those aliens that everyone's telling me about? They're hiding. Well, I don't want to make this all about that, but I knew that they had their hand in our history. And I'm not going to try to sit there and try to tie it in today because I want to talk mainly about these diseases and this disorder. Because I've never seen it over there, their diseases and disorders. Autism. I saw it here where Asian kids, Spanish kids, black kids, white kids, they had it here, but not in their country. These were, I guess, Hitler said it best. They were the most regimented. And when I was young, Mao Zedong was ruling them, and they were regimented. Every single one did the same thing, talked the same way, acted the same way. No one stepped out of line. And that's where that little child inside was like, oh, they robots, oh, they robots. I mean, I became older and I realized, okay, they do have human skin. I felt the whole human skin, so okay, that could be something. But now we have that magical rubber skin, that space skin that they put on top of robots. And I guess all these adult life-size dolls on these crazy people be buying to put in their car for HOVs. Um, so in my head, I kept thinking, as a little boy and as an adult growing up, okay, they had their handset in their world. When movies came out, well, actually, no. After the Pearl Harbor, the history of Pearl Harbor, they decided not to have a military. Then the movies started coming out, and then when the movies started coming out, they were more about yakuza and organized crime and syndicates and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, that's the way they are. TV just portrays whatever they want you to believe or whatever it is they are. It has to be one or the other. The television, they tell you a vision. Television tells you a lie and you envision it. That came out to everyone around the world, and right now everyone has that square box. Everyone watches something off that. And they do not realize what's happening around them. So sometimes you'll forget, yeah, there's things being hidden from us because you'll give up your freedom just to make sure that you're safe in your house. You don't care about anybody else. Great grandparents or great grandparents, they were caring about each other. Sorry about that in the background. Somebody wants to have fun riding. So, what was I saying? They have their hands in everything. When I saw the Chinese syndicates and the Japanese syndicates, the triads and the yakuzas, that's when I started to think, okay, that's what this is all about. Because I grew up with organized crime around me, but it was more the Italian mafia, and they had a code and they had a little bit more respect, and it was totally different than the other mafias that I was seeing. But then when I got older and I was living in Europe, I saw the Polish mafia and the Russian mafia and the Dutch mafia and the German mafia. I was like, oh man, that's what this world is all about. All those politicians, everything, are being are puppeted by all this organized crime, all this organized syndicates, because America also has their organized crime, but it's called a government, and then you have all these governments around the world, and that's a syndicate, that's a global cabal, a kakistocracy, and they're all uniting with each other, trying to keep their hands inside of the system education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, religion, politics, sex, war, counter war. They try to keep it all together. And the only thing they have to do is have a video or a photo of you doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, and then you're their puppet. So it's a puppet puppeting another puppet, puppeting another puppet. Master of Puppets, Metallica, greatest song, because that tells you right there, Generation X, what was happening. And you knew it when you started getting older and you sang it. You were like, oh, Master of Puppets, I'm pulling your string. You knew it. You knew it. You knew what all these songs were all about. You knew what they were hiding inside the lyrics. You knew what Prince was hiding inside the lyrics. Michael Jackson was hiding inside the lyrics. The Eagles were hiding inside the lyrics. You name any band that came out of my time or the time before, they were hiding stuff in the lyrics because they would have got knocked off, killed, executed if they were to awaken the public. You remember that word conspiracy theory? Conspiracy theory came out with President Kennedy. When he was assassinated, CIA introduced that out there so to keep the public quiet. But conspiracy wasn't everywhere in the world, it's being spoken of. They knew on the other side of the water in Atlantic that governments and religious institutions and anything that was in that system was corrupt. They knew it. And they tried to get rid of all that corruption, and they booted them to the United States during the times that they took out the Native American Indians and time of the British and French wars and colonization and the colonies fighting all that. That's when they were trying to boot out all the ingrates and pedophiles and rapists and extortionists and liars and thieves. But genetics seems to stay there because they didn't throw out all of the people, they just threw out the bad ones. Their family stayed. So, at least to say, you know exactly what happened. So, here we go again. Now I go back to the Yakuza and the triads and all this other stuff, organized crime with the Asians. They were very quiet about it. They only showed it on the television, and they showed it to their people around the world. So you didn't see them all everywhere unless you were traveling like me. And then when you got to Africa, you're like, why is there Asian town over here? And why is there a Chinatown in New York and a Chinatown in Asia and a Chinatown in Europe and a Chinatown in other countries? I had to ask myself, so that's when the bells and whistles went off again. So that's when I started to understand that there is something being disguised, there is something being hidden, there is something that we need to be awakened to. Oh, it's starting to rain outside. There is a story about history being shoved under the table, and you will know it, I will know it, everyone that has lived on this planet knows it. So we go back to the beginning of the conversation, all these diseases coming in. They were trying to infect everybody in their own way. And if they couldn't infect you physically, they were going to infect you mentally. And if they couldn't infect you mentally, it was going to be psychologically. And if they couldn't do it psychologically, it was going to be spiritually. That's what all those systems do. They damage you at some point, depending on how strong you are. All right, the video's cutting out, so I'm going to stop it here and make a part 2. And I'll be right back with you in Lakesh.